We've all heard of UFO sightings in which the witnesses describe seeing massive objects, but few can top what was seen in Gravel Ridge, Arkansas. In 2012, a retired flight instructor named Philip R. claims he and two other people watched as a gigantic object hovered overhead. It was a clear summer night, either August or July, around 10:30 p.m. Philip and two other people watched as a silent, disc-shaped object hovered less than a mile over their heads for approximately 20 to 30 seconds. Philip estimated that the object was the size of 4 football fields and had large lights that fluctuated. The object slowly moved up and away from them. The lights faded out as it gained speed, and eventually it took off in a flash. The trio were amazed at the sight of it. Philip called in his sighting to the Pulaski County Sheriff's Department. Curiously, this same object was spotted only 2 weeks prior by Philip's sister, who was sitting on her front porch. She reported that the object came very close to her home before moving off. In yet another strange twist, Philip claims that some 18 years prior, while living near El Paso, Texas, he was witness to several freshly gutted cows. He recalled how the cuts appeared to be perfect, as if done with a laser. It is unclear if this earlier mutilation case had anything to do with the UFO sighting years later. Most likely it was just a coincidence, although who knows. In 1993, journalist Al Hazard collaborated with David M. Jacobs for an article he wrote about alien abductions. The article was titled Inside the Extraterrestrial Breeding Program, and it featured a creepy story involving partying college students that was relayed by Jacobs. It was autumn 1984. Pennsylvania college student Patty Lane and some of her classmates drove up to a secluded mountainside picnic area, spread out a blanket, and started passing around a bottle of wine. The group were having a great time, and soon Patty's bladder was needing a release. After telling her friends of her desire to relieve herself, she scooted off into the darkened forest. Far enough away from the group and under the cover of a tree and some bushes, she pulled down her panties. Just as she was about to let it go, a bright light flashed on her from somewhere deep within the surrounding woods. She assumed it was probably her classmate Freddie trying to cop a peek. Freddie was known for being a prankster and a bit of a pervy weirdo. Half joking and half serious, Patty yelled for him to cut it out. Strangely, there was no reply. No shuffling in the grass. No, "Oh yeah, you caught me." It was just eerie silence. After finishing up, Patty began to make her way back to the clearing where her friends were. She realized that their laughter had died down. In fact, there was no noise at all. It was completely silent. As she stepped into the clearing, the reason for this became frightfully obvious. There in the grass, right in front of her eyes, she observed a half-dozen strange creatures standing around her friends. They appeared to be touching them with baton-like instruments. The students were sitting completely still and motionless, except for her friend Jim, who was doubled over and throwing up on the ground. To her surprise, Patty suddenly found that she couldn't move or scream. Just then, one of the beings appeared at her side from out of the darkness of the forest and took her by the arm. She and Jim were slowly led through the woods to a weird, black, bubble-shaped object, which was parked in a small opening surrounded by trees. Patty could hear Jim vomiting as they traveled up the ramp to the craft. Once inside, the apparently sentient being stripped Patty, positioned her on an examination table, spread her legs open, forced her feet into some stirrups, and then commenced the invasive gynecological procedure that still terrified Patty to this day. After a period of time, Patty and her friend Jim were deposited back in the clearing where her friends were gathered. Patty would have nightmares about the experience for many, many years. In 1972, a woman in Sizabantu in South Africa claims she woke up in her bed late one night to the sound of a helicopter overhead and what felt like a whirlwind surrounding her. She was somehow taken out of her house and soon found herself inside a room where several robot-like beings examined her with numerous types of instruments. She believed that the room was inside of a larger building or object. During the procedure, the woman realized she felt no pain. Either she was given some type of medication to nullify the pain, or somehow, mentally, she was being blocked from experiencing it. Focusing on her captors, the witness began to comprehend that they were communicating via a type of telepathy. She could hear their thoughts, and they could hear hers. The beings, at one point, informed her that she was not fully developed. It is unclear if the beings were referring to her specifically, or humans in general. Before depositing her back at her house, the beings told her that she could wish for anything she wanted, and they would grant her that wish. Desperate for a husband, the woman told them that she would like to simply marry. The beings were slightly taken aback by her response. They did not believe that she understood exactly what they were offering. They indicated that her desire to marry was a rather small wish, and that, if she wanted, she could ask for much bigger things. Ultimately, she declined. The instruments were removed from her body, and she was deposited back in her home. Later, one of the robots returned. It explained to her that they had forgotten an instrument. While she watched, the being dismantled the device on her leg and left. A large blue spot remained in that area of the leg for several days. Lon Strickler of the Phantoms and Monsters blog helped fill in more details of this case. He claims that the case came to light after the female witness passed away a few years later under unusual circumstances. There was an inquest in which her physician, Dr. Kurt Koch, testified about the incident as it was told to him when the witness had the mark on her leg examined. Lon claims that pictures of the leg mark were taken, although he nor I have been able to track them down. Further, I could not find any information on whether or not the robot beings actually made good on her wish. April 1987, at around 11:30 p.m., a neighborhood in Chesapeake, Virginia, lit up as bright as day. The witness, who was only a child at the time, was sleeping over at the home of his cousins. Curious, the three ventured outside to see what caused the flash of light, and were shocked to see something hovering over a tree in the backyard, which was adjacent to a forest. The witness claims that the object was disc-shaped with lights blinking in patterns. The corner light started to blink rapidly until a beam shot out. The beam seemed to be directed into the woods and illuminated what appeared to be 4 figures. At the same moment the figures appeared in the forest, the witness claims several SUVs drove up the street, parking in front of the home of a next-door neighbor. The witness also saw what, to him, looked like an unmarked ambulance-type vehicle. Men emerged out of the vehicles and moved towards the backyard. They were carrying machines in their hands, although the witness was not able to identify what those machines were. Upon entering the backyard, the object, which had been hovering over the trees, shot up into the sky and took off, apparently taking the 4 visitors with them. The strange men then spoke to the witnesses, telling them that the flash and bizarre UFO were the result of a methane explosion, and that they should never discuss what they had seen. The witness would wait nearly 30 years before coming forward to the Mutual UFO Network with this story. A long time ago I made a video called Black-Eyed Kids and the UFO Connection. In it I tried to posit a link between black-eyed kids and UFOs. Recently I came across a case in which a man claims just such a link. It was November 1980. A man named Mickey and his uncle were out coon hunting on the edge of a large hayfield near some woods in Kentucky. It was just beginning to get dark, and the men had turned their dogs loose. They took off into the forest. Mickey and his uncle were standing there when they noticed a strange light in the sky. The light was moving from corner to corner on what appeared to be a large rectangular-shaped object. When the light went to one corner, the object turned red. Next corner, it turned blue. Next corner, white. Next corner, orange. The men watched it for about 10 minutes when something very strange happened. This bolt came out of the sky and hit it, and it split into 4 different pieces and took off. Well, when the bolts came out of the sky, almost like electricity went through us. All the hair stood up on our arms. I looked at my uncle and I said, "What in the world is that?" He He was just standing there, completely stiff. His eyes were like glassed over and black. I grabbed him and shook him, and he just fell over, and he got up, and he was asking me what was going on. He remembers nothing about it. To this day, he remembers nothing. Mickey claims that he believed that the object or objects they saw were in the process of refueling or recharging. I think there were 4 UFOs there, and that lightning bolt or energy beam or whatever it was refueling them. They were sitting there making that rectangle waiting for that fueling, because as soon as it hit, like I said, we felt it. I felt it, and boom, there was 4 of them split apart, and they were gone in the blink of an eye. Regarding his uncle's strange black eyes, Mickey is certain that something sinister took place. It's kind of weird because after that happened to him, he got real religious. I mean, almost fanatical religious. He, to this day, says he remembers nothing about it, doesn't remember it happening. And like I said, his eyes they were like black orbs in his head. To hear him explain it, he thinks it was a negative experience, that God told him to get religious. Like I said, I asked him several times what was going through your head when you were standing there before you fell over. He says, I have no idea. He says, I don't know. I don't remember seeing anything. I don't remember feeling anything. I don't remember anything about it. I can't even begin to understand what happened or why this man developed black eyes while watching the UFOs. His lack of memory of the event and his uncle's sudden turn to religion afterwards makes me wonder if something did indeed happen to one or both of them, and if there indeed was some type of missing time. I'm not saying that the UFO was the cause of the man's black eyes, but it certainly seems so. I've heard of people developing black eyes in possession cases and stuff like that. I don't know if that's what happened here. It sounds like the witness observed his uncle's black eyes, but it could have been like a screen memory, like something else may have happened, and instead of seeing the black eyes of aliens, which many witnesses describe, or abductees, maybe that's what was going on here. Maybe the guy saw his uncle's black eyes, but it was really just kind of mixed in with another memory that, maybe they were abducted, and that he was seeing the black eyes of the aliens, and somehow he got it all mixed up with his uncle. I don't know. I have no idea. That's just speculating. But in the end, it's a weird case, and I guess you can say it does kind of draw a link between black eyes, or black-eyed beings, and UFOs. But I'm not 100% sure. So anyways,